Today, we are going to learn about the plant kingdom.
Before we jump right into it, I would kindly ask you to subscribe for the channel to stay updated.
Classification of life and plants. Whitaker's 5 kingdoms. Life is classified into Monera, Protista, Fungi, Animalia, and Plantae. Second, kingdom Plantae excludes fungi, cyanobacteria, and some Protista. Divided into algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperms. Early plant classification used superficial traits like shape and color. Linnaeus system misclassified plants by equally focusing on vegetative and reproductive traits. Natural systems by Bentham and Hooker used plant anatomy, embryology, and chemistry for classification. Modern classification focuses on evolutionary relationships and shared ancestry. Numerical taxonomy uses computers to analyze multiple traits for classification. Cytotaxonomy studies chromosomes to classify plants. Chemotaxonomy uses plant chemicals for classification, especially when fossils are unavailable. Introduction to algae. Algae are simple, autotrophic organisms with chlorophyll. Found in freshwater, marine habitats, and moist places like soil and wood. Symbiotic associations. Some algae form associations with fungi or animals. Size and forms range from tiny unicellular forms to large kelps. Reproduction in algae, vegetative, through fragmentation. Asexual, via motile zoospores. Sexual, fusion of gametes. Uses of algae. Environmental role. Algae fix carbon dioxide and release oxygen via photosynthesis. Act as primary producers in aquatic food chains. Food. Species like Porphyra and Sargassum are edible. Hydrocolloids. Brown algae produce algin. Red algae produce carrageenan. Agar, extracted from Gelidium and Gracilaria. Used in cultures, ice creams, and jellies. Protein-rich algae, chlorella and spirulina are used as nutritional supplements. Classes of algae. Green algae, Chlorophyceae. Brown algae, Phaephyceae. Red algae, Rhodophyceae. Characteristics of Chlorophyceae. A. Green algae can be unicellular, colonial, or filamentous. Appear grass green due to chlorophyll A and B in their chloroplasts. Chloroplasts may be cup-shaped, spiral, ribbon-like, or plate-like. Store food in pyrenoids, contain protein and starch, or as oil droplets. Has an inner cellulose layer and an outer petose layer. Reproduction in Chlorophyceae, vegetative reproduction, occurs through fragmentation or spores. Asexual reproduction involves motile zoospores formed in zoosporangia. Sexual reproduction can be isogamous, similar gametes, anisogamous, different gametes, or oogamous, large egg and small sperm. Examples of Chlorophyceae: Chlamydomonas, Volvox, Ulothorax, Spirogyra, Chara. Characteristics of Phaephyceae. Brown algae, mostly marine, range from small filaments, for example, Ectocarpus, to large kelps. Appear olive green to brown due to the pigment fucoxanthin. Contain chlorophyll A, chlorophyll C, carotenoids, and xanthophylls. Store food as laminirin or mannitol. Made of cellulose with an algin coating. Has a holdfast, for attachment, stipe means, stalk, and frond means, photosynthetic part. Reproduction in Phaephyceae, vegetative reproduction, occurs by fragmentation. Asexual reproduction involves biflagellate zoospores with 2 unequal lateral flagella. Sexual reproduction can be isogamous, anisogamous, or oogamous. Gametes are pear-shaped with 2 lateral flagella. Fertilization occurs in water or inside the oogonium in oogamous forms. Examples of Phaephyceae: Ectocarpus, Dictyota, Laminaria, Sargassum, Fucus. Introduction to Rhodophyceae. Red algae, named for their red pigment, are phycoerythrin. Mostly marine, thriving in warm regions. grow in shallow waters and deep ocean areas with low light. Most are multicellular, with some having complex structures. Store food as floridine starch, similar to amylopectin and glycogen. Reproduction in Rhodophyceae, vegetative reproduction, occurs by fragmentation. Asexual reproduction involves non-motile spores. Sexual reproduction is oogamous, with non-motile female gametes. Gametes and spores lack flagella. Examples of Rhodophyceae: Polysiphonia, Porphyra, Gracilaria, Galidium. Importance of red algae, crucial in marine ecosystems. Used in industries, for example, agar production from Galidium and Gracilaria. Bryophytes includes mosses and liverworts. Found in moist, shaded areas, often in hilly regions. Called so because they need water for reproduction. Help colonize bare rocks and soil during plant succession. Thallus-like, can be prostrate or erect. Attached to surfaces using rhizoids means unicellular or multicellular. Do not have true roots, stems, or leaves, but may have similar structures. Reproduction in bryophytes, gametophyte, the main body is haploid. Sex organs, male, antheridia, producing biflagellate antherozoids. Female, archegonia, producing eggs. Fertilization occurs in water when antherozoids swim to the egg. Sporophyte formation, the zygote develops into a sporophyte, which remains attached to the gametophyte. Spore production, sporophytes produce haploid spores through meiosis, which grow into new gametophytes. Ecological and economic importance of bryophytes, mosses like sphagnum are used for this purpose. Provide food for some animals. Help reduce soil erosion and improve soil quality. Aid in breaking down rocks and creating soil for higher plants. Liverworts grow in moist, shady places like stream banks and damp soil. Body is thalloid, meaning it lacks true stems and leaves. Marchandia is a common example. Thallus is dorsiventral, with distinct upper and lower sides. Some have leaf-like parts arranged in 2 rows along stem-like structures. Composed of foot, seta, stalk, and capsule. Spores form in the capsule after meiosis and grow into new gametophytes. Reproduction in liverworts, asexual reproduction, occurs by fragmentation of the thallus or gemma formation. Gemmae, small, green buds found in gemma cups on the thallus. Detached gemmae grow into new liverworts. Sexual reproduction, male and female sex organs may be on the same or different thalli. Gametes fuse to form a zygote, which develops into a sporophyte. Mosses and their life cycle. Mosses primarily exist in the gametophyte stage. Divided into protonema and leafy stage. Protonema develops from spores, is green, creeping, and filamentous. Leafy stage grows as a lateral bud from the protonema. Leafy stage features, has upright axes with spirally arranged leaves. Attached to soil by multicellular, branched rhizoids. Antheridia, male, and archegonia, female, develop on a leafy stage. Reproduction in mosses, vegetative reproduction, occurs by fragmentation or budding in the protonema. Sexual reproduction, antheridia produce male gametes, and archegonia produce female gametes. Fertilization forms a zygote, which grows into a sporophyte. Sporophyte structure consists of foot, seta, and capsule. Spores form in the capsule after meiosis, growing into new moss plants. Common mosses, Funaria, Polytrichum, Sphagnum. Pteridophytes includes horsetails and ferns. First plants to develop vascular tissues, found in cool, damp, shady areas. Some grow in sandy soils. The sporophyte is dominant, unlike bryophytes. Has true roots, stems, and leaves with vascular tissues. Leaves can be, microphyls means, small, for example, in Selaginella. Macrophyls means, large, for example, in ferns. Sporangia and spores. Sporangia on the sporophyte release spores. Spores grow into gametophytes. Reproduction in pteridophytes, Sexual reproduction. Spores are produced by sporangia. Spores develop into prothalae, small, free-living gametophytes. Fertilization. Needs water for male gametes to swim to female gametes. Fertilization forms a zygote, which grows into the next sporophyte. Types of spores. Homosporous, produce one type of spore, for example, most pteridophytes. Heterosporous, produce megaspores and microspores, for example, Selaginella, Salvinia. Classification of pteridophytes. Psilopsida, for example, Psilotum. Lycopsida, for example, Selaginella. Sphenopsida, for example, Equisetum. Pteropsida, for example, ferns. Gymnosperms. Gymnosperms produce naked seeds that are not enclosed by an ovary. Includes tall trees and shrubs, like the giant redwood, sequoia. Typically have a taproot system. Some have mycorrhizal roots, for example, in pinus, or coralloid roots, for example, in cycas. Stems can be unbranched, for example, in cycas. Branched, for example, in pinus and cedrus. Adaptations of gymnosperms. Leaves can be simple or compound. Example, cycas has pinnate leaves that last for several years. Leaves are needle-like, reducing surface area to limit water loss. Leaves have a thick cuticle and sunken stomata, reducing water evaporation. These adaptations help gymnosperms thrive in dry or cold environments. Angiosperms. The flowering plants. Flowers develop pollen grains and ovules. Seeds are enclosed within fruits, unlike exposed seeds in gymnosperms. Size ranges from tiny wolffia to tall eucalyptus. Provide food, fodder, fuel, and medicines. Classification. Dicotyledons, 2 cotyledons. Monocotyledons, 1 cotyledon. Reproductive structures in angiosperms. Male organ, stamen, composed of a filament and anther. Anthers produce pollen grains via meiosis. Female organ, pistil, includes an ovary with ovules. Ovules contain the embryo sac. Double fertilization in angiosperms. Embryo sac structure contains egg cell, 2 synergids, 3 antipodal cells, 2 polar nuclei. Pollination. Pollen grains land on the stigma, via wind, insects, etc. Pollen tubes grow through the stigma and style to the ovule. Fertilization. 2 male gametes are discharged, one fuses with the egg cell to form the zygote. The other fuses with the polar nuclei to form the triploid primary endosperm nucleus. Post-fertilization, development, zygote becomes the embryo. N develops into the endosperm, which nourishes the embryo. Degeneration. Synergids and antipodal cells degenerate. Seed and fruit formation. Ovules become seeds. Ovary transforms into the fruit. Plant life cycles and alternation of generations. Both haploid and diploid cells can divide by mitosis in plants. Gametophyte means, haploid, produces gametes by mitosis. Sporophyte means, diploid, forms after fertilization of gametes. Produces haploid spores by meiosis. Cycle completion. Spores grow into gametophytes by mitosis, completing the cycle. Alternation of generations occurs between the haploid gametophyte and diploid sporophyte stages. Types of life cycles. First, haplontic life cycle, sporophyte, single-celled zygote. Meiosis in zygote forms haploid spores. Gametophyte, free-living and photosynthetic. Examples, Volvox, Spirogyra, Chlamydomonas species. Second, diplontic life cycle, sporophyte, dominant, photosynthetic, and independent. Gametophyte, reduced to a few cells. Examples, all seed plants. Haplodiplontic life cycle, both gametophyte and sporophyte are multicellular. Bryophytes, gametophyte, dominant, photosynthetic. Sporophyte, short-lived, dependent on gametophyte. Pteridophytes, sporophyte, dominant, photosynthetic. Gametophyte, independent, short-lived. Examples, Ectocarpus, Polysiphonia, Calps. Special cases, haplontic algae. Most algae follow the haplontic life cycle. Haplodiplontic algae, examples include Dectocarpus and kelps.